All right, welcome everyone to the second live stream in under 24 hours, and as is my typical, I guess my typical modus operandi, made a little bit of a mistake here in the scheduling. So, if we're an hour, or if you think we're an hour earlier, it's because we are. I scheduled this at the current time, which is 12 p.m. Central, on everything but the actual stream. So, hopefully that doesn't disrupt too many folks. Hopefully you're still able to join, and if you're just catching the replay here. Apologies for messing up on the time. Second stream today, Stef van Dop is going to join us, OrangeCon, and someone that I met years ago through the conference circuit, the cybersecurity conference circuit. We're going to be talking about education, getting into penetration testing, cybersecurity, building community, a lot of great topics today. Not a lot of demos though, so that'll be a little bit different than some of the previous. As for the live streams themselves, those will continue to be, I know it would be helpful to get on a consistent schedule, but it's just really hard for me to do right now. So I'm going to continue to schedule these out as far as I can in advance, but they're going to be somewhat, they're going to jump around on the calendar and the time. And part of that's based off my availability. Of course, a big part of that's based off of guest availability and where they're coming from. So without further ado, I want to welcome Stef on to the live stream. So, hey, Stef, welcome. Thank you for taking time to join today. I know it's a little bit later in the Netherlands, which is where you're home based out of. Love going to the Netherlands, by the way, one of my favorite places. The first time I came to Amsterdam was for a conference, and I had the, I guess maybe what Europeans think about Las Vegas. I had that in mind about Amsterdam and Europe, and then I got there and I was totally blown away. It's like one of my favorite places on the planet. So I'm looking for an excuse to come back. Maybe I'll find that some way today. So anyways, but welcome to the stream. I think it'd be probably great to get started just giving a little bit of background about yourself. Speaking of conferences in Amsterdam, I imagine that's, well, I can't pin down the exact time that we first met. I'm guessing it's a hack in the box, probably 10 years or so ago now, how time flies. So I don't know, give us maybe a little bit of background about yourself and what got you into cybersecurity.
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, I've been working at KPN's Red Team for over the last 10 years by now. Like many people, I got interested in hacking at a rather young age. Taking apart the toaster and the radio and then trying to put them back together. Bit of background about myself. I've been, like years ago, I used to work at Accessroll, which was a rather fun technical ISP in the Netherlands aimed at like privacy, security, that kind of stuff. I worked as a consultant for a few years, doing various pen testing, kind of that stuff. And as I mentioned, over the last 10 years, I've been playing around with the networks at KPN, which is a Dutch telecom operator. It's a rather fun playground, so that's why I've been staying around there for quite a while already. I founded a hackerspace in Amsterdam a while back. It's called Technologica Incognita, or Tech Inc. Also as a way, because I wish we had something like that when I was a kid. A place to go explore and hack, but maybe in an ethical way with some guidance from people with a bit more experience and ethical mindsets.
Yeah.
And my background in conferences is pretty varied. I've been going to events like CCC, YMCH for years and years. I really like the smaller conferences as well, I have to say though, like BrewCon, NoHead, WeCon. These are somewhat smaller events in Europe, like 200-300 people, where you actually get to know some people. I've done volunteering at some Ring Zero trainings. I've helped out with DEF CON's biohacking village. I've helped out as a volunteer for the larger hacker camps, because that's basically where we decide that everybody's a volunteer. So when you join, you get a T-shirt with crew on the back, and you're expected to help out.
Hey, that's a good way to do it. Just give everyone a T-shirt that says "crew" and then put them to work. I like it.
Yeah, it works. I mean, they call the volunteers angels.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
you help out every now and then, you also will get like food and drink provided. I always tell people, like, if you're new to these kind of events, volunteering is a great way to join a community. to get some direction, some tips and tricks. Things like DEF CON, for example, are pretty overwhelming if you go there for the first time. So yeah. How I got into security is mostly, I studied computer science around 2000, so long
Okay.
time ago. Back then, there weren't like security masters like you have these days. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I did some small student side job working for a lady called Melanie Reback, who did security on RFID back then. And what I still remember is talking to her, and I asked her like, "Hey, how did you end up picking this?" And she basically said like, security is a way for me to play with all kinds of things. If I want to learn more about how satellites work, I can probably find a job doing security at ESA or NASA. And for me, it was like, it used to be more of a hobby thing. Like I just like tinkering with stuff and I like breaking things. And then I kind of found out that, hey, apparently you can turn this thing into a job. And well, it's part hobby, part fun thing. But in the end, I like the playground that we have, and I like how we're expected to always be learning new things. Technology keeps developing. You won't be doing the same thing for the next 5 years in our kind of work.
Oh yeah. If nothing, if a period in time has not proven that more than what we're going through right now, it's I don't know what would with the the advent of I don't know if I'd say, but like the mainstreaming of AIs and LLMs and just their capabilities and productivity that they're enhancing is it's been pretty amazing. It's not something. I mean, I kind of gotten desensitized to it over the years. Machine learning was the big hype for so long, and it just never really, at the time, it just never seemed to really materialize into anything super useful. Or if it did, I never really saw it. But the LLMs and stuff are really starting to take shape and grab a foothold. And yeah, I can't imagine 5 years from now what my workload and pace of life and everything is going to look like. It's going to be vastly different in ways that I'm sure I can't even imagine right now.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you mention like ML being boring or not delivering what is expected. I did have some chats with our CISO at our company as
Hmm.
well about AI because, me and a colleague sort of started waving a big red flag. Like, I know that half the company is super excited and hyped about this technology, but there might be some security considerations. And
Yeah.
I did like the response that our CISO gave because he basically said like, machine learning is not new. We're already doing data analytics.
Hmm.
Anomaly detection at our SOC has been a thing for quite a while. So yes, there is. It's quite insane what LMs are doing and how fast this field of technology is developing. But on the other hand, um, I think it's important to remember that it's not magic. It's
Yeah.
still something you can explain. I have a colleague who's really into this whole AI stuff, so he had multiple workshops in the team where he basically went over all the weights and how the neural nets work, just to
Mm-hmm.
explain like, hey, it's not a black box, but it is a field like, how do I say that? Like most technology, it's like it's a knife. You can use it for good things and for bad things, or baseball
Yeah.
bats. I'm very excited about the good possibilities. I'm also quite scared about the potential risk with like disinformation, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I suspect again I've had to admit this multiple times. I'm not as into the underlying science, technology, and math that I should be with it. I guess my list of to dos just grows ever longer. But I know underpinning it all is probably a lot of that same machine learning. It's just found a way, I think, for adoption to be quicker and easier. Where it seemed like machine learning took some real science yet to draw up the right models and apply it to scenarios. And so, yeah, we probably have been using it, and I've been utilizing it in ways I don't even realize. It just hasn't been as in my face and easy to adopt as what we're seeing with these LLMs. And I totally agree. It's gonna, at first I was kind of worried it was going to be a job killer. Now, as it's, we've been living with it in a kind of its current state for a couple of years, it's going to create a lot of opportunities too. And I think that attack surface, in fact, I had a live stream yesterday talking about prompt injection, and I started having flashbacks from 20 years ago when I started doing web applications and writing input validation libraries. And it's like, why are we going through this whole process again where we're not taking care of this up front? But I suppose there's a lot of reasons, and it's not as simple as it initially kind of struck me, but definitely ever evolving. So yeah, a lot of things we could talk about just from your introduction. I don't want to go too far back, but you'd mentioned conferences, and that seems to be a very central point for a lot of us in this InfoSec community, where we build our networks, make our connections, of course, share knowledge and learn new things. One of the first cybersecurity conferences I went to was the Black Hat Vegas extravaganza, and I went there pretty much by myself. It was, in fact, overwhelming. And even though I was surrounded by tens of thousands of conference goers, a very lonely event for me. It was a very strange experience. And then I think within a couple of years, I had started attending some smaller conferences, such as Hack in the Box and eventually Ring Zero and some others, and really enjoyed that experience. It was much more manageable and approachable. And I eventually figured out how to navigate both of them, but it took a while. And so I guess if I have any suggestions to anyone, or maybe you do as well, start with the local, the B-sides and the things where you can build your most immediate community and grow from there. Once you go, like now when I go to Vegas, I have people that I like to see and I know, and I only see them once a year there. That's a common theme for a lot of people that go to Vegas. But that took me quite a while to get to that level, just because there's such a sea of humanity there, all doing the same things, selling things, learning things, hacking things. It's hard to find I don't know. I found it hard to find my groove. So yeah, I don't know if you have any other suggestions there on just like getting started in navigating the conference scene.
Well, I know there's things like InfoSec Map. I think it's .com or something. Because there are overviews of like various conferences, and you can filter whether they include CTFs or trainings or stuff like that. But I think essentially what you're saying is quite correct. Local events, local hacker spaces, stuff like B-sides is much easier to get into, and especially with like you mentioned, if you go to an event with 5,000 people, you're probably not gonna make many new friends. You'll probably end up hanging out with the same crowd that you always do.
Mm-hmm.
And on the smaller events, because I remember the first year of BornHack, it was like 100 or 150 people max camping outside. And we basically spent half the conference building our own bar. And people just went mad, extending it with LED lights. And somebody decided to take a couple of tree trunks and turn them into a bench for people to sit.
Oh, okay.
And, they even had like a local, like a big tent, which was basically the community kitchen. So they had various cooking equipment. They had fridges. You could rent like one or two shelves on the fridge. And
okay.
that kind of, brings people together as well. Because if you're cooking food and somebody else is hungry, you'll share some food with them.
Yeah.
You start chatting about stuff that interests you. So I think for both the hacker community and the InfoSec/cybersecurity community, try to find the local event. In the Netherlands, we have, for example, WICON, which is Women in Cybersecurity, which is a group of people who holds meetups specifically aimed at women in cybersecurity, or women who want to get into cybersecurity. There's also like various CTI meetups going on in the Netherlands, and quite a lot of that is also just searchable on Meetup. So there's not a huge barrier for entry there.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm not making anyone nauseous with all my screen sharing. I'm still learning the platform a little bit here. Yeah, definitely. And And the infosec map, that was I've never seen that. That also looks like it's tracking call for trainers, call for workshops, call for papers, and so I've always found a great way that has worked for me. Although this can put you maybe in maybe can help, but a way that has really worked for me for learning things is to try to present it. And it just so happened that I made my pivot into cybersecurity real formal when I started teaching at a university, and so I really had to learn it because I had to not only be able to understand it to some degree myself, but then turn around and hopefully adequately teach it to others. And so, those call for papers and the CTFs are great learning. So there's just a lot of great opportunity to track and try to get involved. And I'd say probably there's the continuum of cost too. The more local you get, more likely the less it's going to cost down to free, and the bigger you get, the more it's going to cost. And Black Hat and RSA and some of those are probably going to be at the pinnacle of just getting involved in the conference in terms of what they cost. It's not like break the bank buy IDA Pro, but it's still pretty expensive. I guess the trainings can get pretty expensive as well. And maybe that's another thing we could talk about, because a lot of these the trainers at the big conferences oftentimes train at the small conferences, or they start at the small conferences and work their way to the big conferences. So a lot of the times you're getting the same training, the same material, maybe even better quality in some regards at a more intimate setting with a smaller price tag or free.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Like I think as people who work in cybersecurity, we tend to work for companies who probably have the budget to fly some people to another country to take part in the training. But if you're like a student or just somebody who's like interested in cybersecurity, but slowly getting there and not yet working for a big infosec company, the cost of travel and hotels just to attend the training almost can add up to like 50-60% of the training budget on top of the amount that you're paying.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been very lucky that I have a nice training budget and I'm allowed to go to trainings, mostly in Europe, but somewhere else is discussable if it's only available there. But yeah, as you said, Black Hat has an insanely good list of trainers, but many of those trainers are also doing local events. And it's probably a better place also to have beer with the trainer or dinner with the trainer after your training, because you're probably sitting in a class with 10 other people, which is, I think, probably more fun as well.
Yeah. Likely you've heard of, if you're on the stream, or joining the stream, you've heard of Practical Malware Analysis by Mike Sikorsky and Andrew Honig. Where I used to teach, we had it was like a B-sides before there were really B-sides. And Mike came and taught a 2-day course on campus, and it was in a small classroom. And I got to know him well enough that in fact, I just emailed him over the weekend. I don't talk to him all that often, but like he knows me. I didn't, the folks that worked with him and know him really well. Of course, that's not a thing. One of the other guys, also Jared DeMott, he came and taught at the same university during the same conference, and got to become really good friends with him. And he really became for me a door opener for probably where I'm at today. I mean, my first conference training was because of him. My first conference talk was because of him. Tons of great things, and it's because he came, him and Mike and these others that come to these small conferences, regional conferences, as well as the big stuff they were doing, and spend time with you. And then like you said, you got a chance. You got to capitalize on it, but you get more of a chance to maybe capture their attention and have a beer. I mean, Madison, South Dakota is a town of a few thousand people. So like once the training's done, there's only so much. It's not like Amsterdam where there's a billion things you could go and do. There's only so much you can do here. So they're always a little more willing to go out and hang out with you afterwards, it seems like. So yeah.
It's funny, like last year I went to a training myself about ECM security, which was like, kind of relevant for the kind of place I work at. And the funny thing is, like, there was somebody in the class who's usually a trainer at Hardware.io, Marius Munch, if I pronounce his name correctly.
Okay.
I ended up chatting with him just because we were in the same training, and it turns out he was working with the university professor who used to teach network security back when I was studying. And
Oh,
now
yeah.
we have an intern doing baseband research based on the stuff that he wrote about. Just because I had that fun chat with him, and at some point a student came to us like, "Hey, I'm looking for a research project." I really like how those random moments where you run into somebody, we often call it the hallway track at
Yeah.
conference.
Yeah.
You're chatting with some person and they're with another person who you don't know, and you end up finding out that you love the same thing.
Yeah.
And you might collaborate, you might learn from each other. I think that's the one of the most important things of security conferences as well is the socializing, is the networking. The
Hmm.
people you know from online, but finally sitting together and you might work on a project, or you might just have a good time chatting about all kinds of topics that are not related to security.
Right.
It's a nice thing.
Yeah. Um, I don't. We probably shouldn't dwell on conferences too long, but I was curious what your thoughts were, if you care to share them on. Like we're talking about all these great benefits of the in person, but then we also talk about some of the cons. I'd say probably one of the biggest detractors from the in person experience is, as you mentioned, the cost. It can be very expensive, flight, hotel, food, all of that stuff. So, what are your thoughts on virtual? It seems like that one is a lot. People have more of an opinion. Either they like it or they hate it. I don't tend to find a lot of folks that are just like, yeah, I don't care. I'll take it if I can get it. And maybe that's just because of the conversations I have. But I'm a big proponent. I think it enables us to share and to look to share knowledge and to learn in a setting that is maybe even more comfortable for you, and makes it more accessible because then there isn't all the travel and overhead.
Mhm.
Live streams like what we're doing, right? This is like a great opportunity. But as a student, maybe it's easier to get distracted. As an instructor, I certainly don't have any real insight into what my students are doing. So, any thoughts on
Yeah,
virtual, live virtual, virtual on demand, just kind of that whole e-learning space?
one thing I found interesting is like I've had similar discussions around trainings as well, like online trainings, things like that. And I've always said, like, personally, I really prefer sitting in a classroom with my agenda blocked. I don't even bring my corporate laptop. I take 2 days to sit in the class to learn a topic. But I remember speaking to a friend of mine who's not so mobile. And he basically said, like, virtual trainings allow me to take a training. And
Yeah.
I was like, that's super obvious, but I never really thought about it, that there are people
Yeah.
who,
Yeah.
either through budget or their personal circumstances, going in real life into a training is not even an option.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of um, online conferences, what I noticed, because I helped a little bit, like I mentioned, with Ring Zero at some point, also during the COVID
Hmm.
period. I noticed, like, I was a student assistant, and one of my main roles was sitting in the classroom with my camera on, because half the people taking the trainings there didn't put on their camera. And
Mm-hmm.
trying to teach a group of people without being able to look whether they can follow, it's a hard challenge. I will say that, at least.
Yeah.
Because for me, like, I don't often give trainings, but I do often explain things to people. And
Yeah.
usually there's a point in the conversation where you notice that they go a bit glassy-eyed, and you're like, okay, wait, I need to stop spewing so much information. Let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the hard part. Like, how do you replicate that in an online setting? I did like the whole, like, setup with, like, having an online stream and, like, a Discord server next to it. And if you get lucky, then people will start chatting on the Discord and asking questions there and helping each other. Um,
Hmm.
but there is a reason why I started a conference that focuses on in real life trainings, because I do
Yeah.
think it helps when the teacher can stand next to you and explain and look with you, and even with screen sharing and online and such. I don't think it's entirely the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There's a number of times where if we're in person and I'm instructing, I'm just, kind of cruising the room, and the casual stop, how are you doing? What are you working on? Will turn into a whole conversation where, had I not stopped, they probably wouldn't have felt comfortable or didn't want to ask their question or whatever the case may be. And to put that in a virtual setting, and I don't know how to do that. And so, you're much more on your own as far as a student to discipline yourself to ask questions and make sure that you're engaged. And so, yeah, I agree. I think it serves a purpose, but it's a much different paradigm. And maybe part of the challenge too is that I have a hard time, I know, of thinking. I always think in terms of in person in the classroom, and I can't take that one for one to a virtual, and it has to be different. And I don't know we've quite figured out how to make that different enough to fit the virtual learning environment. I think we're still just, COVID was a great example. Well, let's just grab a camera. We'll get a Zoom platform, and we'll just stream ourselves talking, let people come in. We'll charge a little less, and maybe set up a Discord. And I love having the Discord. I think all of that is really important to have the continuity between the sessions, but I just don't think it's quite still not the right setting for virtual trainings. There's more that we need to do there, but
Yeah, I will say, like, I'm on a Discord chat from a Dutch hacker community. And these are like people who are starting to get InfoSecs. They're doing hack the box challenges together, that kind of stuff. And what they did do is, like, they have, I think it's on every Wednesday and every Sunday, somebody will take an hour to talk about something.
Oh, sure.
I maybe walk through a challenge in Hack the Box, or maybe somebody who's like doing bug bounties will present a little bit on the approach that they're taking to do that. For that kind of stuff, I do like the online community with Discord, especially with like the option to record it and people can watch it back later. For that kind of stuff, I think it works quite well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in, I found my way in a couple of communities that sound somewhat similar, just a little bit more organic, sharing knowledge and doing it consistently. And I like those. I like those as well, because it seems like the topics come up a little bit more. A lot of times we're putting together content, and then we're trying to tell folks why they need it. Where communities like that, it's what they're all working on, and then, hey, I'd like to learn more. I'd like to share about this thing. And I don't know, just it feels maybe a little bit more in touch with what's actually going on. But then again, right, if you want to become a reverse engineer, for example, there's a path. It's not like everybody doesn't have to go down the same path, but there's just like certain unavoidable skills you have to learn. And I can give you those skills if you want to come take this thing that I've already created. So, yeah, it's fun. I know at the end of the day, I think we're very similar in that I love sharing things that I've learned, and I'm just trying to find ways to be better at it. Okay, so at the fear that we're going to go really long, because I guess I have a tendency to talk a lot, which is weird because I'm fairly introverted. When you catch me outside of these settings, like when I'm not training and when I'm not doing a live stream, I prefer to kind of be alone. So it's kind of a strange world I find myself in. But again, I think that's kind of true for a lot of folks in the industry. I think like you can kind of retreat into your computer and do your thing and do your job and contribute, and you don't have to be like bombarded with things, although maybe that's not true anymore. So something that I'm noticing, and I know we talked about before we started the stream, you're certainly noticing, is the evolution of what you're required to know. Not just that things are constantly changing and that you have to keep up with maybe the core discipline or job role or responsibilities that you want, but there's all these other things. Like for me, I like to do reverse engineering stuff, but now I'm finding that in order to do that, I really need to be much, much smarter on AI and LLMs and some data sciences. And then there's, trying to do things at scale. So I need to be a little bit DevOpsy. And I have a programming background. I started computer science as well because cyber wasn't really a thing at the time. It was, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And that's also challenging because I think we're seeing it, not only the expectation we put on ourselves, but the expectation that's coming from our peers, our employers, our management chains. So what are your thoughts on this all these growing things of buckets of knowledge that we can't just be superficial, and we have to have some pretty deep technical chops in order to stay afloat.
Yeah, I think like um, for the kind of work I do, where I often write a report about the stuff that we found. If you're going to write a report, it should include recommendations about how to do things better.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
But that does mean that I end up telling DevOps people how they should do their CI/CD pipelines. I end up telling AI people how they should implement guardrails. I end up having to be a little bit of an expert on almost everything, which is on the one side really fun. But I do think we're reaching a point where our field is too big to be comprehended by any single person by far. And the question is like, yeah, do you want to specialize in one topic? And some people do that. We have the NFI in the Netherlands, where people are like really hardcore forensics researching. But I have noticed that, yeah, indeed, we're sort of wearing many hats, and that is a challenge, because I don't have a background in data analytics. I don't have a background in sociology and psychology, and that's also a thing. I had this chat with somebody who gives a social engineering training at OrangeCon, and we were talking about prompt injection, and we basically came to the conclusion, like, prompt injection is almost a form of social engineering. Asking questions in such a way that it kind of fools the limitations of a prompt, or the guidelines put in there. It's really strange, the whole thing. Like, if you ask ChatGPT how to build a bomb, it probably will say, like, I can't help you with that. But if you ask it, like, I'm worried that I might accidentally make a bomb with stuff in my kitchen cabinet, can you tell me what not to put together? It will
Yeah.
and that's a weird thing, but I don't really have like a good answer, a good solution, or I think we're dealing with the fact that, yeah, if we want to help and advise people, and that's to me, that's part of being a hacker and part of being a cybersecurity professional, we're gonna have to be talking about a lot of different topics.
Yeah. I think there's, part of it's going to be just the necessity of where you want your career to go. You've got to be able to read the tea leaves to a degree and say, okay, avoid AI at this point. That's to your peril. I just don't see how you could chart a future in information technology, information security, whatever, without including a big dose of that. Go back 5 years, I might have said, I could chart a future without data sciences. But now even that, I'm saying, I really probably shouldn't have ignored that as long as I've had, because I've had some good opportunities to learn it. And then there's also, you want to stay true to the things that you're passionate about. Because I know whenever I go gallivanting off into areas that really aren't what get me ticking every day, I pay for it in ways that are sometimes unexpected. And a lot of times it's just like that wake up in the morning and you go, I don't really want to do this. I went to be a pilot years ago, and as exciting as that sounds, it was I went through a NATO program and flew with some Dutch. That's why I put some orange on for you today in the background. And but like, I got to a point where every day I was waking up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't sleep at night. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I really hate this. This really isn't for me. And it was a long, painful journey. I know I've shared that with folks before. So, so I don't know. I think it's just something you got to constantly be evaluating and looking at, and making sure that you're still finding that satisfaction. I mean, no job's going to be 100% just rainbows and unicorns and flowers and everything's great. But, if at the end of the day that you don't feel like you're going in a good direction, you have to gut check yourself. There are times where I think maybe I should buy a campground and just run a campground. I think I would enjoy that too, but I don't know. The technology's always been there since I was little. So
yeah, what I do think is, like, as long as you're lucky enough to work with a team of people who have this kind of interest, you can work together. And, I have people in my team who are really into Active Directory, and I'll end up going to them for some help. And we pair people, like if there's a junior who wants to learn about hardware hacking, we'll put him on project with one of the seniors who's an expert on that. I think the idea of teamwork and learning to delegate, and I find delegating really, really hard because I'm very much inclined to, I'll do it myself because then I know it will be done the way I want it. But yeah, I think like teamwork and delegation are probably going to be the solution towards having to deal with all these various topics.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and something that I don't know. Maybe I don't know why. I guess this is maybe something that is just my nature. I grew up on a farm out in the country, and I spent a lot of time alone, and self-sufficiency was kind of the game of the day. But even now, I think that's kind of what drew me to reverse. Like when I reverse things, it feels like a solo endeavor. I've got a binary, I've got my tools, I've got my knowledge, and that's it. And I'm not going to reach out for help unless I absolutely need it. But that is something that is definitely valuable to be surrounded by folks that are, realize you're not going to be the expert at everything. It's impossible. But then to have people that you can comfortably reach out to, because that is something else I have experienced in the field, and I'm sure other fields have the same thing, where people can get a little bit territorial with their knowledge. They can be a little standoffish. Our TFM has, I think, a good side and a bad side. Oh, am I still here?
Yep.
Okay. I just had a little blip in the stream here. I guess that was Restream's way of telling me to stop talking. But it's a good side and a bad side, and that sometimes certainly you want to be able to be independent in research, but then at the same time, folks will use it to be like, don't approach me. I don't want to help you. You need to figure this out on your own, and that can also be off-putting when sometimes all you need is just a little nudge, a little course correction, and you can really unlock like what it is you're struggling to learn or do or accomplish. So, yeah. Well, I don't know. So teams are great. You said you've mentioned OrangeCon a couple times. I would feel remiss if we didn't bring that up at least once before we get to the end of the stream here. Not saying that we're there yet, but I'm going to bring up the site. Okay, so now we got some double orange. But can you tell us a little bit about OrangeCon and why you started it and when is it and what could folks expect that are going there and all that great stuff?
Yeah, to give you a bit of background, as I mentioned...
Could you pronounce this for me?
Meervaart.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yeah, for your information, basically one of the things we decided was to not go for like a really fancy hotel in the city center of Amsterdam, but instead go for like a bit more on the outside of Amsterdam. It's Meervaart is actually a theater venue. So normally they have shows with like people dancing on stage and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And that's where we hold the conference. If you scroll down a little bit more, yeah, that's basically
right here
where it is. But to give you a little bit of background, basically me, Sherida and Barry, the other two people who founded OrangeCon, we always used to help out a lot with Hack in the Box in Amsterdam. We sort of ran the Dutch side of things. We had a whole crew of enthusiastic volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years back, Dylan, the founder of Hack in the Box, basically announced that they were stopping with the conference in Amsterdam. And at that point, we got a little bit sad because, like I said, we had a nice community, a bunch of volunteers who's been doing this thing for like 8 years in a row. And we were like, we don't want to lose this good community of people.
Yeah.
And well, then after a bit of brainstorming, we basically said, well, I guess then we have to start our own conference so we can keep having a crew that can help out with the conference. And that's kind of where we decided to do this thing. And we called OrangeCon to sort of give people an idea of like it's a little bit it's aimed at the Netherlands. So I'm happy for people to come from other places. It is a bit of a like for the community by the community event. We wanted to create something that focuses on sharing knowledge, but also to be this event where, like, if you're a student, uh, you don't have a lot of money, you know. So I wanted a conference where a student could actually afford a ticket. And to give you an idea, the current ticket prices that we have are something like 125 euros for early birds and 175 euros for a normal ticket. So that's for a full day conference, 2 tracks with talks, multiple workshops, lunches included, drinks afterwards are included. And the way we do this is by basically running OrangeCon as a non-profit. So I'm doing this just for the fun of it. It's been a lot of work in the first year, but well, we had a good time, so we're definitely continuing with this. And the idea is that, like, from sponsorships and people buying trainings, we can make this affordable conference. And that's, to me, like, I always think, like, you know, we need more people working in our field. Everybody's saying, like, I can't find enough people to hire, I need more people. If you need more people, then we need to find a way to get students interested in joining our work. And also, as a way of, you know, giving something back, I learned a lot. There were people who were explaining cybersecurity when I was a young student who didn't know much yet. And now I'm sort of the person who's telling young people, like, you know, you should go join a SOC. And I remember, like, a few months ago, somebody came up to me, like, you know, you spoke to me 5 years ago when I was a student trying to decide what I wanted to do. And now I'm working at I'm not going to drop names for Dutch companies, but he's working at the SOC of a serious info security company in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
and he said, like, you know, the fact that you advised me to go do this is kind of how I ended up here. And if I can have, like, 1 or 2 people be inspired by a conference, deciding to work in InfoSec and enjoying themselves, I think we kind of reached the goal of why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I hope in the long run that we can get to a point where we can even start creating some slots inside trainings for students to attend for free, to continue on this idea of sharing knowledge. But that's something I expect to happen more in the future when we got a bit more established, got a bit more well-known as well. Because for your information, the first time we did this, we were hoping for like 100 people to go to the conference.
Yeah.
Ended up, because we had a smaller theater area in this Meervaart location for, so basically we had a room which could fit 200 people. Ended up selling like 225 tickets, excluding the crew and stuff, and then had to say, like, okay, this is the max for the first year.
Yeah.
So we're trying to grow, but not too fast, because I want this sense of a small community where people know each other. So we're aiming for like maybe 300-400 people this year, just to keep it a bit small still. A little bit of promotion to mention. We still have a CFP that's open. Though I have to say that right now we're basically not paying any trainer or sorry, we're not paying any speaker to come to the conference. So people are really coming on their own budget. We've had people who basically said, like, you know, I'll book the hotel myself because I really want to come, which is a really awesome thing. But for people from abroad or from other parts of the world, right now it's going to be a bit challenging to fly you in and put you in a hotel, because that's not in the budget for a non-profit in the second year of running.
Yeah, absolutely. So call CFP is open. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. A thunderstorm is rolling through, which is why I'm getting more shadow. I rolled the dice and I let my window be my natural light source to this side, and that was a mistake. So 5th of September for the conference. It looks like you have till 31 July for that CFP. So that's really awesome. A lot of time, if you're listening to this the first time you're hearing, if you want to submit workshops, what is it? Talks and workshops. So As we talked about early at the stream, just great opportunities if you have things to share, if you want to grow your network, if you want to really see how much you understand a topic. This is a great opportunity to do that. And it sounds like a great venue. You mentioned Hack in the Box, and I know I've mentioned it a couple times. That's another one of those conferences that is very near and dear to my heart. And in fact, one of the last times I went, I took a group of students when I was teaching, and they came over 10 or 12 or so and volunteered. So, maybe at some point, if the conference continues to grow, if there's some opportunity to help out or help orchestrate things, I would love to be able to do that. In that case, students, the university helped pay their way, and we did some fundraising and stuff. So it I wasn't trying to look for an opportunity to pass the burden and the financial burden onto the conference. I was trying to pass it on to the university, which I guess ultimately passes it on to the students. So maybe that's not such a great thing, but college is the time to travel and to be, to just take those risks and spend that little bit of money. So what year, you said this is the second year then?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounds like you have every intention of making this a long-standing event.
Yeah, it's I like the whole thing. I like sharing knowledge. I like having a community, having some laughs with volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
I still enjoy rolling duct tape to make things look nice.
Right.
I'll send you a link. Let me double check that it actually works. Yeah. One of the things we did last year as well, even despite it being the first year we ran it, is we basically recorded all the talks. So
okay.
talks from last year are all still on YouTube to watch.
All right. I'll post this in the chat.
Thanks.
Anything surprising? I mean, you've been involved with conferences not just as a goer, but as a volunteer. You've seen probably a healthy dose of both sides of it. Is there anything now, being at the helm, truly at the helm, that's really surprised you in terms of either the challenges or just I didn't expect this, or how neat it is? I have to imagine that at the end of the day, when you give that closing keynote and that thanks for coming, it feels pretty satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. One, we actually had a lady from Dutch cybersecurity with a very impressive CV who gave a very personal talk about the challenges of autism and other different mental ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
She actually asked the audience for people to raise their hand whether they had ADHD or various things. And what we noticed is like the percentage of people with ADHD and other things like that is super high in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this moment where, like, instead of having yet another talk about an exploit, we had somebody talking about her personal life and getting this diagnosis. And then
sure.
all her colleagues basically saying, like, we already knew this because we are the same. And it was this kind of like special moment where, might have shed a tear or two.
I bet.
Yeah, that was really impressive. Also being so honest and open about, challenges in your life. And I think that's maybe something that we should keep in mind. One of the things we did, for example, also at OrangeCon last year, was to have a silent room, just a place for people to sit down, have some water, because there are people for who a conference with hundreds of people walking around is very challenging, mentally overwhelming. So I think that's one thing that we're still really thinking about, like, how can we make this an event that's inclusive for everybody?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I'm hoping to release a podcast soon with someone where the same topic came up, and it's the first time in my career I've actually talked about it with anyone. So twice in a very short period of time is not a coincidence. I came from, I guess I kind of got introduced to the working world when I joined the military. And I learned really early on in my military career to never admit or say anything because it can lead to, disqualify you from career opportunities. It can inhibit the growth of your career. And so I never wanted to bring any of it up. And so then I just kind of been conditioned to ignore it. Like if I can't talk about it, I don't want to identify it in other people. And we just all have to kind of suck it up and do the job. And I think, yeah, I don't, something that is very, very overlooked and probably misunderstood by a lot of people. So that's really interesting. Cybersecurity conferences tend to focus on technical things. They don't have to. They can focus on other things.
Yeah, on a slightly less heavy topic, I can tell one other story which I really liked, and that's the fact that we actually at some point got a call for paper submission from this guy called OrangeCon.
Okay.
You might have heard of him. He's, a pretty big deal with the kind of exploits that he does. And I basically sent him an email like, hey, dude, we're a non-profit conference. I know you're from Taiwan. We definitely don't have the option to fly you in and stuff. And I thought that was the end of it.
Yeah.
But then I got an email back from him like, I like community. I like knowledge sharing. I'll just fly myself in.
Oh, awesome.
And we were like, dude, we're a small conference in the Netherlands starting out, idea of community. And then this like super big name is basically just dropping in and saying like, hey, I like the name of your conference. It's called OrangeCon.
Yeah.
So we ended up printing like a special T-shirt for him, which was bright orange and had like orange side, OrangeCon. And it shows me that like, people are actually kind and willing to help. And sure, there are egos in the community, but I also see like top-notch speakers taking the time to help a student during a CTF at the event.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of thing which makes me really happy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Great, great series of stories and just a little behind the scenes. Maybe you do that this year. You fire up your camera and do some YouTube shorts or something and give us more of a glimpse on what's going on. And that would be really neat to see. I've worked a little bit with conferences here and there, but usually I'm coming in to train or be trained. And my experience is, I guess, maybe a little bit more typical. Well, I think we are getting close to the top of the hour, and I did unfortunately need to have a little bit of a harder break today. Anyone has questions, please let us know. If let's see, we got maybe one question here. How to create evasive malware? Well, I'm glad you asked. Although we're not talking about creating evasive malware. One of the former live stream guests, Kyle Cucci, wrote a book on evasive malware. I think you could reverse engineer the book to figure out how to identify evasive malware techniques and then probably apply them on your own. If not, take it as a challenge to try to get your jailbreak your AI and your LLM prompt to help you with that. I think some of them are better than the others, but that's a pretty good place to start. Evasive malware book. You can find it on No Starch, so I would check that out, give that a read. Other questions, though? Let us know. Use the chat. Otherwise, once this has been posted, the replay here, I monitor these and certainly will pass along any comments or questions that come into Stef. Stef, any kind of final thoughts here as we start to wrap things up?
No, just I want to thank you for inviting me to be able to talk a little bit about this conference that we're doing. And in general, it was a really nice chat.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate it. I was excited to see the conference, and even more excited when I saw all the familiar faces that were hosting it. It was a great opportunity. Hopefully, I will find myself coming and helping to support. If there's anything I can do outside of the stream here to help draw attention and background support or anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, because I'd love to be a part of it in any way I can, volunteer and otherwise. So Yeah, really looking forward to hearing how it goes. I saw some familiar names on that training roster as well. So if you're looking for training, definitely take a look at the trainings that are laid out there. Some really great talent that'll be there, and I think a really nice venue. So with that, I don't see any other questions. I think we'll call it a wrap then.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Steph. I will. Good luck with the conference this year, and I'll keep in touch. Maybe come on again and talk post-conference about how things went.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in the next stream next week. The stream is with I'm gonna have names. Names and me are just terrible. But Yesko, the creator of Binary Refinery, is going to come on and give us some more binary refinery demonstrations. So hope to see you all next week. All right. Until then.